Hey, what's up? This is Ill Factor from beatacademy.com, and in this video I'm going to share some music production tips while recreating Tame Impala's Lost in Yesterday. I'm also going to be doing something that I don't usually do in these breakdown videos. I'm going to be covering how to actually get the vocal sound that you hear on this record. So watch it to the very end because I'm going to be sharing a lot of cool nuances that can really help you in your projects. So let's dive right in. So let's listen to the finished result. All right, let's start by focusing in on the drums. There's a lot of things going on and some nuances in the sound design of the drums to make them feel like the reference. So I'm going to start by creating our own acoustic drum kit pattern. And for this, I'm going to use Addictive Drums by XLN Audio. And I'm going with an indie drum kit. And the reason I'm going with this drum kit as opposed to like a other drum kit is because this is just nice and tight and it kind of matches the best, in my opinion, to the actual song. So I've eliminated the room micro, and just a little bit of that overhead present. And then what's cool is, and very much like any other virtual drum plugin, whether it's BFD, Addictive Drums, or Easy Drummer, you have the option to route the output of each individual sound so that you can also use your third-party plugins or your DAW stock plugins to shape the tone of that sound. So let's focus on creating the pattern. So I want to make sure that I'm at the right tempo, 121 BPMs, and I'm going to just double click this clip slot. Now you could play the pattern in or you can draw in the sequence. It's your own personal preference. I'm going to go ahead and draw it in for those who are following, who might just be used to drawing in their drum programming as well. So let's locate our kick drum, which is going to be C1. And then let's locate our snare sound here. Now, what's different about using a third-party plugin rather than the drum rack will automatically allocate the sounds, but here we just need to find the sounds that we want to use. All right. So let's start. There's a hi-hat. And I'm just going to hit the fold button so that now it just focuses on those, the notes that have information on them. So just the C1, D1, and C2. Those are the kick, snare, and the hi-hat. And that's going to really just eliminate any notes that we're not using. It makes it easier for us to program. So now let's go ahead and create our pattern. So we'll have the kick and the snare on beat 2, and we'll repeat that pattern again. So we have this nice little... And then what we'll do is duplicate the loop so we can extend that pattern from 1 bar to 2 bars. Now, what we have to be very careful, especially with acoustic drum programs, is that the velocity goes a long way here. So changing the velocity will determine a different response in that sound. Just keep that in mind. Now let's go ahead and insert our hi-hat pattern. I'm going to use the pencil tool here by clicking the keyboard, the letter B on my computer keyboard to draw in the notes. Now the problem is, if I leave the grid in the current setting that it's at, it's going to give me a different straight timing. So for instance, if I'll draw this in, that's a whole different feel than what we hear in the song. So I want more of a swing feel. And you could achieve this by accessing a triplet grid. So you got this triplet, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But we're not in 6/8 here. We're in 4/4 time signature. So let's go ahead and right click on our grid and choose triplet grid instead. And that's going to allow us to now draw in and have a triplet subdivision. Big difference. So let's start by focusing on these first 3 hi-hats. Like I mentioned before, velocity goes a long way. So to get this as real sounding as possible, we're going to do some velocity adjustments. So I'm going to have the first one accent. Second one, I'll bring down the velocity a little bit. And the third one, I'll accent a little bit as well to be different. And then I'll draw... and that'd be cool. You can kind of just experiment, find what feels good for you right there. But now let's go ahead and select that and duplicate that over. So we have the difference in velocity. Okay, cool. Now let's find our tom, because we have a... All right, so I went from taking the fold out here. And you might notice that when you press a key here in Ableton Live, it'll highlight that note where it's at. So you don't have to strain your eyes and look all the way to the left to see where that note is. Okay, so now I found that there. All right. I need maybe just play the rhythm with do 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 do. That's what we're hearing the tom fill at the very end. Right here. So that's where the initial hit goes. And then let's go ahead and make sure our headphones are on so I can hear the, raise this up here. And then right there. So I need to actually go in a little bit more on the grid and make some adjustments here. Right there. Yep, and you just gotta play it right here. There you go. And so let's hit the fold button so we can focus in on just the elements that we want to focus in on. And there we go. So we've got our drum pattern here with our acoustic drum set. Now what we need to do is extract the sounds and be able to now manipulate and shape the tone a little bit. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to go ahead and create 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to create several audio tracks. And what I'm going to do is go into the addictive drum program, and I want to have the snare separate. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to click this little arrow, and it says master output. That means you're sending, the snare is going to go out of the master of this plugin. So what I want is a separate output pre-fader. So let's just click that, and now we're just hearing the snare residue from the overhead and the other elements. So let's do the same thing with the hi-hat as well, separate output. And I'll also do the same thing for the kick. And I'll leave the tom, since I have multiple toms, I'll leave that there as well. I'll let the main output of this plugin be just the toms. The reason for that is so that since I'll have all toms running out of the stereo output. So I'll do the overheads, separate output. So I'm choosing these individual elements to go out of their own separate output. And once I have these audio tracks here, I can then go choose the input. Where do I want the input of the audio for this track to come from? So let's choose drums, because that's where the addictive drum plugin is. And now inside this, you have another option. We're going to do kick. We're going to choose the actual output already designated within the plugin. So click that, and then make sure to hit the input monitoring to in. So you notice you don't have any patterns here, but you're receiving the audio that this pattern is playing. And so we'll do the same thing here. We're going to go external input, drums, and then we're going to choose snare. And so I'm going to follow through, just continuously doing this until I get all the elements that I'm breaking out that I want. So I'll put that there, and drums, and let's go ahead and choose overhead. So now, put all this, we should hear the kit all over again. And now what I can do is just say, this will be main/toms, and I can just kind of organize everything here. And the reason why I'm doing this is so I have a little bit more control over shaping the tone of these drum sounds. Now with the drum kit separated on each individual audio track, we can now do a little bit of tweaking. So for the toms, I want to go ahead and add the drum bus here. I'm using Ableton Live's drum bus just to bring up a little bit of the transients, some saturation, crunch, and damping it just a little bit. Then I've got a filter to actually take up some of the high end. So I'll play the pattern here. And that's what we're doing with the toms. Just want to actually dull them out a little bit. And then the overhead, there's just nothing on there. And the hi-hats, just a little bit of EQ. Now all this is really just to shape the tone. I'm trying to get this to feel like a sample. So just took a little bit of the high end off, because the warmer something sounds, like the less brightness you have using an EQ, the warmer it sounds. So, and then we have the snare drum here, just a saturator, just putting about 8 decibels of drive on the saturator and just bringing back down the output. But what I want to do is duplicate the snare track. And so we're duplicating the same exact, remember, there's no MIDI on this track. It's just receiving audio from the same signal source here. So if I'm duplicating that track here, I'm going to get the same exact signal. What we want to do now is insert a reverb directly onto this snare. So I'm going to go to Audio Effects here, Ableton Live, click and drag the reverb right onto that snare. And now we can kind of use another EQ after that to just take away some of the low end. And I really just, I'll just leave this input processing alone. And I'll do the same thing. I'm going to warm up this reverb and bring the decay down. And I'll just get that to taste. So now I can blend this reverb snare with the original snare. I want to dial the decay time back a little bit. Now I've just selected all of these tracks and hit Command G to group them. And now what I'm going to do is some processing on the actual overall drum kit as a whole. So we'll use Ableton's drum bus. And what's on the drum bus is I'm using this because it's got a couple things all in one instead of just using all. It's got some drive, so it's the saturator. You can use Ableton saturator if you don't have access to the drum bus. Some little bit of crunch, which you can use some distortion. I'm not doing any damping here, and I'm using a little. Actually, there's probably no transits being used. So here's without the drum bus. This is with it. And I have it set to about 66%. I was just dialing it back because the real smack and the punchiness of this is going to come from this third-party plugin, UAD Audio, the DBX 160. Hands down, one of my favorite compressors to use on acoustic live drum kits because it just makes it a beast. So here's without it, and then I'll put it on. You really hear that the punchiness, and really it just becomes overall crisp and punchy with that compression on there. And so what I'll do is now balance this out to lower the snare drum with the reverb on there. And just give a little bit of just a blend here. Now what we're going to do is really to help the drums kind of solidify them and feel like, okay, this is cool. Because we're not there yet. I would say we're 50% there. The other 50%, and something I love to do, is layer my acoustic live drums with sampled drums. So here are a couple breakbeat loops that I have. And that last one, I was just kind of selecting, I'm just looking for the texture. And that last purple one here, the track 8, was the one I really liked the best. It just had some of the actual, just the texture and tonalities that I heard from the reference. I thought it was just the closest match to it. So, but let's focus on this timing here. Listen to the pattern. So it's really straight, and as we mentioned before, we have our drums with this triplet feel. So if we play them together, it's just going to be a train wreck. So how do we fix that? We can quantize the actual drum loop to fit that same triplet grid that we created in our drum pattern. So let me just make sure I have it there too. And I'm going to select the amount right here. I'm just selecting this portion of the loop, and I'm going to make sure I go right here, right click, the same thing. I want to hit triplet grid, okay? And I can, that's if you wanted to nudge something to the nearest triplet grid. But what I'm going to do is hold Command Shift and U to go to my quantize settings. And I'm going to quantize every transit to the nearest 8th note triplet. Okay, so we hit OK here. And this, I'll do it one more time. And now we should have, and now that it snapped the audio loop to fit that triplet feel. So here we have it again. I'll unwarp this. That's the straight version. And now here's a really, really cool, because now we've got that swing vibe back into it. So just taking that portion, what I'm going to do is head over to my arrangement window, and I'm only going to be using the first part of that loop. So I'm just click this and just use So I don't need that part here where it's, so we can just go ahead and clip this and record that, just that bit right here. Now we can also just go in more in depth and just take that last kick drum so that we don't have that little cymbal that's happening there. And it's a little rushed, so I want to make sure that I nudge this sound a little further back like this. Right? And I'll also do the same thing. I'll let go of that so that we have a nice... Right? So I want to make sure that everything is fitting well. There we go. So that's going to be my pattern. And what I'm going to do is going to consolidate that by just highlighting all the different regions that we've just edited and hit Command J. That's going to consolidate that into one region. So I've already done that and I've created my pattern over here. So this is what we have. So that's going to be now layered with the drums that we've programmed. Now what we'll do is go ahead and put an EQ on that to eliminate some of that low end. And then I'm going to sidechain this with another kick drum. So I've added another kick drum here. It's just a simpler. And I'm going to solo that. And I've drawn the pattern here in the arrangement window. Just a simple 4 on the floor. And that's just going to add some more emphasis. But it also allows me to sidechain now our drum loop with that kick drum. So I'm going to go to ill kick here, and that's going to be the source that's going to sidechain the drum. And this just helps create a little bit even some more bounce to that breakbeat. And now we'll have everything playing together. I can go into my drums now and lower the overhead if I wanted more of that. So if I want more of a sample, less overhead. If I want to feel more of the live acoustics, more overhead. And now let's go ahead and just group all of these together. Now with the kick drum, the acoustic drum kits, and the breakbeat, we're going to consolidate all of them into a group track just by highlighting them and Command G. And now we're going to do a little bit more gluing just to kind of just make them all feel all as one. So I'm going to use the RC retro color for that. And here I've got a little bit of some tube saturation, some digital distortion here as well, just a little tiny bit of space. But this is also going to help just create this nice cohesiveness with all the drums together. So I don't want them to feel unbalanced or separated. So let me play without it. And now let's turn it on. So really, really cool. And then I'm just using the Fab Filter EQ just to bring up a little bit of the mids here. Now the finishing touch for this, you can get the sense of a flanger running through the drums, or I'm not sure if it's just on the hi-hats alone, but in this case, I have a meta flanger here. This is a plugin by Waves. This meta flanger. It's actually one of my favorite flange plugins. It's just so simple, but does the job really well. I have the mix set to 100, and we're going to send a little bit of the drums to the return track B, which has the flanger. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's send a little bit of the drums there. And that kind of gives that nice glaze and that flange that we hear in the record. Now let's focus our attention on the bass. So for the bass, I'm using the IK Multimedia's Moto Bass. Great plugin for recreating electric bass sounds. And so I'm using the 70s P bass here, and I love the tone and texture of the bass line in this song. So a lot of tweaking going on to getting it as close as possible, but let's start by focusing in on the pattern. So here is the bass note pattern. And so I chose a 70s P bass. The play style, I've got the muting at around 74%. So there's some muting going on there. Strings, I've changed them to flat wound. The electronics, I actually kind of just left this alone. And for the amp, I've got the DI, the direct input, direct signal, cranked up, and a little bit of the amp. The amp is going to give you a lot more of that bottom end, but this is what's going to give you a lot more of that mid-range vibe. So that's how I have it. And then I'm going to use an EQ to really shape the tone here. So we're going to swoop away around that low mid at 270. Because when you hear the bass line in the reference, when you just listen and focus in it, there's a lot more this presence here, like that 700, that high mid section here. And there isn't a lot of that low mid. So I'll solo this. That's what we're taking away. So I want to accent spotlight this frequency in this range here. And then I'm using an 1176 plugin by UAD Audio to really help the initial transits in the attack, the punchiness of the bass line to come through in the mix. So without it, you can hear when it goes, doom, 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 that note there sticks out a lot. So the 1176 is going to be a great compressor to kind of even out the overall performance, but the little plucks, the finger plucks that are going on, they actually stand out a little bit more. So I'm going to use that. And then using a sidechain compression here also from the kick drum. And that's really going to create a nice little pulse and a little bit more bounce with that bass line. And then another EQ after that to accent a little bit more of that high mid. Let's put it together with the drums. So now let's focus on the pads that we hear throughout the song. So I'm going to use the wavetable here, but you could use any 2 or more oscillator synth that you might have. And both oscillators are going to be set to a sawtooth because we're going to get that nice, lush, bright tone. So here are the chords. What we need to do is kind of put a blanket over them. So yes, initially we're going to use our filter. So let's filter out some of the frequencies. Let's have it around 331, see what that sounds like. And we're going to raise the attack because if we have it really fast, then it just gives you that. So we're just raising the attack a little bit so it just takes a while for it to. Nice and soft approach there. And then let's turn on the unison. We're going to set it to classic. And this is just basically detuning both of these oscillators. 6 voices and just set the amount to your personal taste. So I have it right here at 45. Now I'm using an EQ here just to shave off a little bit more of that high end and focus a little bit more on that mid-range. And then adding a reverb directly over that for space. Then for the bright pads that we hear, I have another wavetable, same thing, 2 oscillators, but this one is just an octave higher. That's why I use the 12 semitone transpose option on the bottom. Just kind of brought a voice down here with the classic mode unison and brought the frequency filter all the way up. So we have that nice bright shimmer. And just a little bit of chorus after that, just very, very minimal, and the same reverb that I'm using from before. So together with everybody else, we have the nice shimmer pad sitting on top. So now I'd like to actually spend some time talking about the vocal production and kind of getting that same similar vocal tone and feel that we hear on the record. So let's start by having the lead vocal doubled. And that's the real key here, is that you double the lead vocal and just have one lead in the middle. And then you don't just duplicate that lead, but you go ahead and re-record another lead, same exact line, and you're going to have both of them in, and you're just kind of blending the balance a little bit, but I'm going to have both leads in the middle here. So here are those lead vocals. Might have been something, who's to say. Now, obviously, you're going to have some tuning involved. So for track one, for this one, I went ahead and used some Melodyne to do some tuning, drag and drop drag around the notes, make sure they were in tune. And then for the second double track, I'm just using the Waves real time tuning. Just same vibe, just different options here for you to tune. Might have been something But what's really important is that you have both tracks as tight as possible placement wise, because that's really going to be key. When audio tracks or when vocal tracks are not aligned well, that's more noticeable than pitch differences. So you make sure that the lead vocal is on well there. Now, what we have going on here for some of the processing are more so let's use some EQ to shape the tone. So I'm using the Fab Filter Pro EQ here, just taking away some of the low ends, the about 321 low mid here. Then who's to say does it help to get lost I'm using the dynamic mode here for this specific band around 2K just to actually compress that frequency and just brightening it up a little bit here. And then after that, I'm going to compress those both lead vocals with an LA2A. Then who's to say does it help to get lost in yesterday? All right, and then once I have when I recorded once I got it going to the LA2A, I want a de-esser, and this de-esser from Waves is really unique in the sense that it actually makes it sound warmer because it just the way it works. I like the tonality of this de-esser for this purpose. Then who's to say does it help to get lost in yesterday? And going with that vintage type of vibe, I'm using the J37 mono tape saturate, just a tape emulation here, the Abbey Road Studios tape from Waves. Then who's to say does it help to get lost in yesterday? Just putting a little bit of that slapback delay on the insert, but then the real magic happens on the send. So let's just walk through some of the sends here. So I'm going to enable the send. So on return track D, I have another delay set to every 16th note, kind of just a really short slapback, another slapback delay with a little bit of chorus on there. We're enabling the filter here of that delay, so we take away any of the low end and the high end. Then who's to say does it help to get lost in yesterday? And then send E, which will be this one right here, has a doubler on it. This is going to help widen and create that nice overall width and chorusy effect with the lead. Then who's to say does it help to get lost in yesterday? And after that, we're going to actually send these vocals back with using a nice reverb. So I'm really drenching this with reverb here, and that's going to be our send F. So our return track F has the Valhalla vintage verb. I'm using the plate mode and just kind of toyed around with the decay, have it at 2.54 seconds. This is all just kind of tweaking it around till it just really sounds the way I like it. But the most important key feature here is filtering or EQing that reverb output so that it's really dark and warm and it doesn't get too bright in the mix of things. Then who's to say does it help to get lost in yesterday? And then the next send that we have here is another delay. I'm going to enable that. And that's send return G. But this is going to be a quarter note delay. So we have the 16th note. We have a little bit of slapback inserted directly on the lead vocal. And then we have the quarter note delays. Then who's to say does it help to get lost? So that I know which ones are all my returns for the lead vocals or just vocals in general, I'll go ahead and highlight them and usually color them white. So I know that all my white return tracks belong to vocal processing. Then who's to say does it help to get lost in yesterday? So those are the lead vocals. And now what I'm going to do is go ahead and import and record background vocals to support that lead. So I've gone ahead and recorded myself doing the background vocals here. And here I'm just doing the same exact line, unison, meaning that I'm singing the same melody as the lead, but I'm going to be panning one left and one right. So here are the background vocals. Might have been something, who's to say, does it help to get lost in yesterday? So I have just some tuning on each individual vocal track, and then when I group them together, just some simple EQing here with the just taking a lot more low end than I did on the lead, and doing some just stereo compression for both of these vocals. Might have been something, who's to say, And they're a bit softer. They're not going to be as energetic as the lead vocal, but they really do help create the width and expand. Might have been something, who's to say, does it help to get lost in yesterday? I'm sending them a little bit, I'm sending some of the background vocals to the same sends that I'm doing with the lead vocal. So now let's go ahead and listen to everything all together. Well, thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful, encouraging, and inspiring in any way. And if you'd like to follow along with this video and have access to the sounds that I'm actually using, I went ahead and actually bounced the stems in case you didn't have access to Addictive Drums or any of the plugins here. So I've actually created the stems for you in the audio files as well as the MIDI patterns too. And you can access this even if you're not using Ableton Live as your DAW. So let me walk you through that. Simply visit your Finder window, and when you unzip the file that you're going to download by clicking the link below in the description box, just simply hit the samples folder in that Ableton Live session and go ahead and check the recorded, processed, anything that I've frozen, or anything that was imported can be accessed here. So that's how you can get access to all the sounds, locate them, and use them in your DAW to help follow along. Now be sure you subscribe and like this video so that you can be notified of when I do my live random Q&As and stay up to date with upcoming videos. Also, let me know in the comment section below what you would like to see next. This video was actually a product and result of that when you guys decided that you wanted this, and that's when I went ahead and did. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.